Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the Animal Tone podcast.
Hi, Claudia. Thanks so much for having me.
Before I get too before I get too swept up, okay, wait. So we've got
Uh-huh.
feral species, invasive species, and you've mentioned now kind of the idea of naturalized species who might have previously been viewed as problems, but somehow become accepted in a given environment.
Yeah.
Why should we be thinking about these kinds of concepts, or how do we think about these kind of concepts in relationship to biosecurity? Like, why is this important to think about when we're talking about animals and biosecurity?
Yeah. So I think, there are many different ways of understanding biosecurity or context, but when we're talking about this, um, it's really about the creation of safe life for a particular designated desirable population, right? It's the biopolitics of making particular populations live. And so I think, in these central to this is are these ecological discourses where particular ecological configurations are seen as desirable or somehow idealized, and this is what the goal of environmental management is, to make these populations live,
Mm,
and to protect them against the threats that could put them at risk. And I think alien invasive species and feral species are sort of two of the main biosecurity threats to desirable ecological configurations, I would say, within dominant scientific paradigms.
mm. Safety came up with Stephen as well. Kind of the idea of safe for who, right?
Mm.
Because something we spoke about is one of the kind of common answers to the idea of a threat is to either wall them off or to kill them. So you kind of end up. Yeah, and this holds, I think, kind of the tension of what you were saying earlier with these ecological configurations and appreciating that ecology and relationships change over time, and kind of maybe affording some time to see where they might go, versus constantly trying to control what those configurations might become. Because it's not just that we have an ideal type in our mind that we're saying, oh, this is we're constantly trying to, I think, construct these ideal types and avoid threats,
Mhm.
but the threats seem to almost somehow often be kind of other animals. Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so interesting to me again to think in historical terms how understandings of ideal ecologies also shift over time. Um, so at the start, in the late 19th century and early 20th century, in many settler colonial states, there's were active acclimatization societies whose explicit goal it was to establish species from back home, so from largely England. Um, and Franklin Ginn has a paper about this in New Zealand about the acclimatization societies, and the botanical gardens. But there were folks who were actively importing species from home and trying to get plants and animals established because the ideal ecology was to recreate the familiar, comforting, tamed natures of back home.
Mm,
And throughout the 20th century, we there's this large shift in thinking where suddenly the ideal ecology becomes understood as sort of this static, pre-contact, pristine, nature, which is a very colonial understanding of what nature is and humans' relationships with it. So suddenly, the impetus is to remove all of these now considered alien invasive species, and try to renaturalize areas or rewild areas by recreating these past idyllic ecologies. So it's just fascinating to me that there's such a shift within a relatively short period of
mm,
time, with complete opposite intentions and natures that are trying to be created. So I think it's interesting to think about biosecurity from that perspective, where suddenly what had been understood as a desirable configuration is now seen as a threat to this new ideal, and the biosecurity measures in place have to be the removal, the eradication of these introduced species.